Silent screams. As the door creaked open next to the room you and Lily were hiding in, the soft sounds of footsteps echoed through the silent house. You held your breath, your fingers instinctively tightening around the fabric of Lily's sweater as she buried her face deeper into your chest. You could feel her trembling, every tiny shake of her body syncing with the erratic beats of your own heart. The masked figure outside was still. The rhythmic creaking of his footsteps had stopped, replaced with an unsettling silence that felt heavier than the air itself. You dared not move. Not even a whisper could escape your lips. Through the crack of the closet door, you saw a shadow pass by the gap. You could almost hear the sound of your pulse in your ears as the figure paused, inches away from the barricaded door. A thud. He was testing the door. You could see his hand on the handle now, turning it slowly, painfully slow. You didn't want to admit it, but you were terrified. The survival horror games you played countless times seemed like jokes now. This was real, too real. And right now, the only thing keeping you and Lily safe was a flimsy closet door and your silence. Suddenly, the figure kicked the door, sending a harsh, echoing bang through the house. Lily let out a soft gasp, quickly muffled by your hand as you pressed her face against your shoulder. You leaned in close, your lips brushing her ear as you whispered, "Shoo, please." The door groaned but didn't give way. You thanked the universe for your last-minute barricade. The footsteps receded again, and the shadow moved away. You both sat there frozen, waiting to see if he would come back. The seconds felt like hours as the only sound that remained was your own shallow breathing. I think he's gone," Lily whispered, her voice barely audible, her breath warm against your neck. You loosened your grip on her, exhaling deeply, though not in full relief yet. "We need to get out of here," you said, your voice soft but urgent. "This house isn't safe." Lily nodded, her eyes wide with fear but filled with determination. You helped her off your lap and carefully pushed open the closet door. Every creak of the wood sounded like a warning, but the coast seemed clear for now. The two of you stepped into the dim hallway, lit only by the moonlight filtering through the broken windows. The mess of shattered glass and overturned furniture told the story of the masked intruder's rage. Your legs still throbbed from the wound, but adrenaline kept you moving. "We have to find the others," Lily whispered, her hand gripping your arm tightly. You nodded, limping slightly as you led the way through the corridor, the eerie silence wrapping around you like a suffocating blanket. As you reached the staircase, you paused. Something felt off. You glanced down the steps and saw blood, a trail of it, leading down toward the basement. Lily's grip on your arm tightened. "Oh my God, Marco and the others," she whispered, her voice breaking. You didn't respond, but the fear in her voice mirrored your own thoughts. Had the masked intruder already reached them? Were you all that was left? You swallowed hard, your mind racing. You couldn't just leave them down there, but you knew you were in no condition to fight whatever that thing was. "We go together," you whispered, determination setting in your voice. "We find them and we get out." Lily nodded, though her face was pale. You both descended the stairs, each step slow and calculated, the wood creaking ominously beneath your weight. At the bottom, the blood trail became more pronounced, leading toward the door of the basement. The door was slightly ajar, and your stomach churned at the sight of more blood smeared across the handle. You reached for it, hesitating for just a moment. Behind you, Lily's breaths were shaky, but she was still there, standing strong. You pushed the door open and were immediately met with the smell of dampness and something else. The basement was dark, only faintly lit by a single flickering light bulb that hung from the ceiling. Shadows danced along the walls, making everything look more terrifying than it already was. "Marco," you called out softly. "Jules? Anyone?" No response. Just an echo. You stepped forward, and the cold cement floor sent a shiver through your body. The sound of dripping water echoed through the space, but that wasn't what caught your attention. At the far end of the basement, slumped against the wall, were two figures. Motionless. Lily gasped, rushing forward, but you grabbed her arm, holding her back. You could barely breathe as you slowly approached. Marco's lifeless body was crumpled against the wall, his eyes open, staring blankly into the void. Jules was next to him, her face pale, her breathing shallow. She was still alive. "Help me," she whispered weakly. You and Lily rushed to her side, your heart racing. She had a deep gash on her side, blood seeping through her clothes. You pressed your hand against the wound, trying to stop the bleeding. "We need to get out of here," you whispered urgently. "Now." But as you said it, a sound echoed from the top of the stairs. Slow, deliberate footsteps. He was back. You locked eyes with Lily, the same terror reflected in her gaze. You were trapped. You felt your pulse quicken as the footsteps grew louder, closer. The masked figure was descending the stairs. You had to act fast. Jules was barely conscious, and Marco was gone. But you couldn't let Lily and Jules share the same fate. You refused to let that happen. Suddenly, a plan formed in your mind. You glanced around the basement and saw an old metal pipe lying on the floor near the furnace. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. Grabbing it, you handed Lily your phone. "Call for help now," you whispered fiercely. "Hide with Jules behind the shelves. I'll distract him." Lily's eyes widened in fear. "No, you can't." "I can," you interrupted, your voice steady. "And I will. Trust me." With a trembling nod, she took the phone and dragged Jules to the far corner, hiding them behind a stack of old boxes. You stood, clutching the pipe tightly, and positioned yourself near the bottom of the stairs, just out of sight. The footsteps were right above you now. The masked figure appeared in the doorway, his head turning slowly as he scanned the room. His eyes landed on Marco's body, then flicked toward the shelves. He didn't see you. Not yet. You waited, your heart pounding in your chest. The figure stepped into the basement, moving toward the corner where Lily and Jules were hidden. This was your chance. With every ounce of strength left in your body, you swung the metal pipe hard against the figure's back. He stumbled forward with a grunt, caught off guard by the sudden attack. You didn't wait for him to recover. You swung again, aiming for his arm this time, knocking the knife he was holding out of his grasp. "Run!" you shouted to Lily, your voice echoing through the basement. Lily scrambled to her feet, helping Jules up as they bolted for the stairs. The masked man, now furious, lunged toward you, but you dodged just in time. You swung the pipe once more, this time landing a hit square on his head. He crumpled to the ground, unconscious. Panting, you dropped the pipe, your body trembling with exhaustion. The adrenaline was starting to fade, and the pain in your leg flared up again. But you couldn't stop now. You hurried up the stairs where Lily was waiting, tears streaming down her face. "We have to get to the car," she whispered, her voice shaky but determined. You nodded, limping toward the front door as she helped Jules. The three of you moved as quickly as you could, your only goal now to escape. The sound of distant sirens filled the air. A signal of hope. Lily had gotten through. Outside, the cool night air hit your face, a stark contrast to the suffocating fear you'd felt inside the house. You helped Jules into the backseat of the car, and Lily jumped into the driver's seat. Without another word, she slammed on the gas, speeding away from the house. As the house disappeared from view, the tension in your chest began to ease. The masked man was behind you now. You were alive. You had made it out. The sirens grew louder, and soon you saw the flashing lights of an ambulance and police cars approaching from the opposite direction. Relief washed over you. Help had arrived. Jules was safe, Lily was safe, and so were you. Lily pulled over to let the emergency vehicles pass. She turned to look at you, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and gratitude. "We made it," she whispered. her voice barely audible over the sound of her pounding heart. You nodded, feeling the weight of everything settle in. We made it, you echoed, reaching over to hold her hand. As the sun began to rise in the distance, casting a warm golden light over the horizon, you allowed yourself to finally breathe. The nightmare was over. As the golden rays of the rising sun crept over the horizon, casting a warm glow on the winding road ahead, you felt a quiet calm settle over the three of you. The weight of the night's terror still lingered, but with each passing mile it felt more distant, a nightmare fading into the morning light. Jules stirred in the back seat, letting out a soft groan. Lily glanced into the rearview mirror, her face tight with worry. You reached back, placing a hand on Jules's arm, gently waking him. Jules? How are you feeling? He blinked slowly, his eyes adjusting to the light. His face was pale, but he managed a weak smile. I'm alive, he whispered hoarsely. Thanks to you. Lily pulled over again, this time more calmly, as she looked back at him. We're safe now. The cops are on their way back to the house. You looked at both of them, a surge of emotion rising in your chest. The past few hours had been an unimaginable ordeal, but you'd all made it out. The masked figure's identity still haunted you, the why behind his attack gnawing at your mind. But for now, you needed to focus on what was important, your survival, your friend's safety. Lily's voice broke through your thoughts. We need to get Jules to a hospital. Her tone was urgent but no longer panicked. He's still bleeding, and I don't know how long he can hold on. You nodded. I think the nearest hospital's about 10 minutes away. Head toward the city, it's straight down the highway. As Lily sped off toward the hospital, you glanced out the window. The countryside gave way to suburban neighborhoods, and eventually, the skyline of the city loomed in the distance. The sight was comforting, familiar. Like you were returning to reality after a dark detour into something nightmarish. When you finally arrived at the hospital, the scene was chaotic. Emergency responders quickly took Jules inside on a stretcher, and you and Lily were ushered into the waiting room, still in shock. As the hours passed, the hospital began to feel like a safe haven. Nurses checked on you. A doctor came to reassure you that Jules was in stable condition, and the police arrived to take your statements. The masked man, whoever he was, had been found unconscious back at the house, arrested before he could escape. You didn't know his motives yet, but for the moment it didn't matter. He couldn't hurt you anymore. Lily sat next to you in the waiting room, her hand in yours, both of you still processing everything. You saved us, she said softly. You didn't have to. I wasn't going to leave you behind, you interrupted. I couldn't. She looked at you for a long moment, her eyes brimming with gratitude. You're brave, you know that? You shrugged, feeling the weight of the word. I just did what I had to. After what felt like hours, a nurse came out to tell you that Jules was going to be fine. He had some bruises and a few cuts that needed stitches, but nothing life-threatening. The relief you felt was overwhelming, almost like a wave crashing over you. Lily hugged you tightly, her voice cracking as she whispered, "We made it. We're okay." And in that moment you realized something profound. No matter how terrifying the ordeal had been, you were stronger than you ever knew. You'd faced danger head-on, protected the people you loved, and survived. A few days later, after the hospital and police reports were behind you, the three of you sat in Lily's apartment, finally able to relax. Jules joked about starting a detective agency. After all, you'd taken down a killer. You all laughed, the sound a welcome relief from the tension of the days before. Lily reached over, intertwining her fingers with yours. No matter what happens next, she said softly, we've got each other. We'll be okay. And for the first time in what felt like forever, you believed her. The nightmare was over and the future, though uncertain, felt hopeful. You were safe, together, and ready to face whatever came next. stronger and closer than ever before. In the end, the storm had passed, and the three of you had made it through, bonded by the unbreakable thread of survival and friendship. It wasn't just a happy ending. It was a new beginning.